sign is not on, but we are live now. The sign's not working, so we are recording now. And we'll kind of close you. We'll have the. Okay, so we'll wait a minute or two.
Well, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. The first item of business for us is a review and approval of the minutes from our April 16th meeting. So if people have had a chance to review those, entertain motion or any adjustments or corrections.
So moved.
Motion and second. Any discussion or corrections? Being none, take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The meeting minutes are approved. So we've got the review and the approval of financials then.
Good morning, RDA members. Attached is the RDA budget and actuals report as of May 31st, 2025. These reports represent year-to-date budgeted and actual expenditures in the operating and actual expenditures in the capital budget. Revenues, expenditures, and other funding and sources are reported as they are realized. As of May 31st, 2025, expenses are $151.32 for bond services, $82.03 for water service, which totals $233.35. Yearly bond payments have been made as of April as well. Is there any questions?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The financials are approved. Next item is public comment for items that are not listed in public hearing or discussion. Seeing none, we can move on from there. Business items for public hearing and public discussion. Okay, Mr. Chair, and then other business. We have a discussion regarding public access agreement for Jameson Street.
Thank you, Commissioners. We have, this is a cleanup piece. The site in question, this odd kind of rectangular / weird triangle arced piece, is a remnant of what was the Sioux Line project from many years past. There are 3 small parcels that are still under RD ownership, this piece being one of them. And as the DRC was moving its project forward in what was the former space at the end of Gibson, where Social Security, et cetera, was at, they realized that there's not an easement through there for the road. So this is the RDA's road. So what we're looking to do is just clean that up to clear up the access for at least get the media access cleared up for the DRC's use to make them comfortable as they take over the building. So what we have is I'm requesting that you empower us to enter a public access agreement for this section of Gibson Street, which will, when approved, would allow public to access and move that through as they currently do anyway, but it cleans up any of the technicalities until we can determine what we need to do long-term. Be happy to answer any questions on this. The document hasn't been drafted yet. We put this together very quickly to do it forward. So an approval would authorize staff to be able to put that together and go ahead and sign it, which we have a very standard template for public access on public roads.
Just to clarify, so the easement would be across that area bounded in yellow? Is that correct?
Yep, that little section of Gibson Street that is within that odd-shaped parcel. Later on, we can discuss what to do with them. We've looked at those parcels in the past. Like I said, the RDA does own it. That tapering rectangular piece directly south of the one we're talking about is also owned by the, actually, I take that back. That one we ended up selling to give enough lot space for a developer to build a fourplex. But there's a little curved piece, another little curved parcel in there that's still owned by the RDA. And again, serves no function, unbuildable, can't do anything with it, but still on the RDA rolls. So we can discuss those at a later time.
I have a question, if that's okay. Thank you. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding kind of what is being proposed or what the solution that staff are proposing is. Is this just granting an easement to the new owners? The Western Dairyland, I believe, owns that new.
Correct, they
right?
would be taking ownership. It's granting access so they can utilize the road as an access point to their property.
Okay. So-
We will formally draft what we need to as far as easements goes and resolve that at a later time. That'll take a little more time and more steps.
Yeah. Did you have signed this? Add?
Yeah, so the easement will be between the city of Eau Claire and the RDA. So
I see.
the easement will be written in such a way that any public passing through the area has the allowable access to pass through.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't, or like clarify anyways, if it, whether it was an easement or transfer of property, but that is helpful. Thank you.
And just to clarify for long-term, that could either be turned into right-of-way or that property transferred. That'll be the next step beyond this.
Absolutely. And I do have a draft memo listed out. I believe it should have gone in your pocket or packet. If it didn't, I can provide this to whoever might be interested in making the motion.
And I guess one follow-up, Dave, as you talked about this, to me, it makes more sense for this to obviously go back to city ownership versus stay. I'm assuming we're making this decision just to move it quickly.
Correct.
And then long-term, the idea would be it's either a right-of-way or back to city property, because it seems like every time we've talked about parts of these, we can't do anything with it, so it seems quite odd that the RDA continues to have, ownership of something that will never get sold or never be used for anything else.
Absolutely. This route quickly addresses the concerns the Western Dairylands attorney has in terms before they take ownership of the site. So this confirms they have access to it, and then we can, again, clean that up in an appropriate way moving forward when we have the appropriate time. And this is one of those parcels that tends to fall off our radar. We actually brought these up probably 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was probably about the time that we had to sell that small parcel to the neighboring property owners so they have enough land mass to do a fourplex. Even though they didn't need to build on it, they had to have a big enough lot to build a fourplex. It's the last time this was discussed, and then I said it just kind of falls off the radar because it's a tiny two little parcels that I don't think collectively even amounts to an acre of land.
If it pleases the commission, I'll just read the draft of the motion here, since I don't think everybody got that in their packets. So it says, I hereby move to approve the executive director to enter into a public access agreement for the section of Gibson Street that is located in a parcel owned by the RDA east of Dewey Street.
I like it so much, I'll move to approve it.
Second.
A motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion is accepted.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. And let's see. We have a discussion regarding the future RDA areas of focus. Continuing our saga in that respect. Bringing up the point.
I am. So again, picking up the conversation that we have started, looking at future areas of potential development districts. A quick overview of what we have previously presented to the board. This was just a basic extension of the Cannery District, moving west and a little north of that space in some of the areas that have similar conditions to what were found in the Cannery District. We also looked at this. We've teamed this to Southwest Industrial District. This is the area off Short Street, west of the old Shopco Plaza, It's heavy industrial, borders the river. Comp plan shows this as medium to high density residential. So this would be termed kind of a long-term acquisition and redevelopment the same way that the Cannery District was for the RDA. And again, this we during the South Lake Street District, again capturing a few areas south of Lake Street, coming off the downtown core. There were a couple of properties in there that are likely candidates for redevelopment or potentially attention by the Redevelopment Authority that are unused, underdeveloped, and are falling apart. So that was why this district had been added in. And then the North Barstow Street extension to the north. Again, the current district stops right in that little corner in the southwest of the boundary. So this just extends the boundaries over and up into the rest of that developable neighborhood. Direction from the board was to focus more on the West Cannery expansion and the Southwest Industrial Quadrant expansion. We also had some discussions that relates to, and then one other additional one, a little bit of a extension of North Barstow District to the east of the current boundary lines, again, still south of Madison Street. So those would be the spaces that we had looked at. We had also talked about looking to do some level of a scattered citywide site looking at individual properties. Oshkosh had done something like that, we found, and we started looking at that as a potential model to do a greater district. Discussing with our legal team, et cetera, there was questions about how well this would work in the city. So we started looking at, is there a way to do a broader district but more condensed that meets the more traditional parameters of a RDA development district? So we came up with a new district option, and we're referring this one right now as the expanded district. This one encompasses a number of those spaces that were previously identified. It captures the Cannery District area. It captures that area north of Madison, north of the current Barstow District area, captures in and around Banbury Place, captures the core of the downtown area, historic Randall Park neighborhood. All of these areas, except for the very northwest quadrant, are in a qualified census tract. So they are, by definition, lower income areas, according to HUD definition. Kendall has been collecting and running a lot of data analysis on these districts, which we'll go over a little bit later. But this we felt has the potential to let us operate in a broader area. And again, not necessarily how we have previously where it's all scrape and clear, but surgically acquiring sites. This also provides a lot of opportunity to look at picking up housing and housing projects as a potential project, acquiring severely blighted properties, vacant properties, et cetera, and getting them back in the hands of folks for affordable housing options. And it provides a lot of area to operate out of. Before I click, any questions on this particular slide?
I do have one question. I'm curious to know, so the southern extent, so I see kind of the logic in having the geographic boundaries on the west, north, and east. And I'm curious, I know further south, there's also high density areas beyond the area, including green. So I don't know if staff could just share like the logic or how you picked the boundaries on the southern extent of this potential district.
Sure. We had Ayers and Associates, we've been feeding them data points to map in across on heat maps. And we've started out with vacancy maps. And the next meeting we'll be able to show some of those layered maps. They're still working on those. One of the maps they showed was vacancy, and we looked at vacancy based on a count in time last fall, how many properties had a water meter but had no water service, not actively running water into the service. Again, not a great indicator, but it's an indicator that it's an unused property that should be some level of operation. It could still be a vacant lot, or it could be a unit that is unoccupied and the water shut off at the meter. This square basically captures that core, which had most of the properties that were identified as, through this metric, as vacant, were found within this highlighted area. It was a very square piece, extended a little further to the west, just a little further to the north. We grabbed it through boundaries, using street boundaries, which is how we typically arranged our RDA districts. And we shrunk it a little bit to more encapsulate the qualified census tracts, because some of those areas were not. This kind of condenses it and hits areas that are likely to meet the criteria to be eligible for RDA focus. So that was the primary driver. There are others scattered around beyond that, but this captured a large chunk of that particular metric.
Can I ask a couple questions? Thanks. Quickly, one is, I think the answer is no, but is there a time limit? Like, when we create a district, is there like a 30-year window or something to do something and then it closes? Or when you create one, does it just exist until there's action to close it?
I would defer that to City Attorney Steve Nick.
There's no time frame.
Okay.
It's not a TID district or anything like that has a, a statutory time frame. A lot of times TID districts work together with RDA districts, so like if you create a TID, that would have to be time specific. But on a district this large, you'd have much more targeted TIDs that then would have a clock running on expenditure and reimbursement,
Sure.
but not for a RDA district.
Okay. And similar to the TID analogy, you can have overlapping redevelopment districts. Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right, we'll flip on through. This is an example, again, some of the properties that are in that expanded district. These are two kind of leftover commercial remnants in what is otherwise a completely residential neighborhood east of 3rd Street. It's just a reflection of how this area has changed over time. So these would be the type of properties that you'd look at in terms of selectivity throughout this area. Defining what are now different uses, what likely might be non-conforming uses after the zoning change goes through. The proposed zoning change, if it's adopted as planned, will change some of the zoning as well. And again, some other examples of probably these are in the downtown core area. Again, the one is the empty, it's the dry cleaners on the corner of Seaver Street and Farwell Street. It's unutilized, say next to Sojourner's house. A lot of issues related to that space, so it is the type of property that the RDA could pursue within these districts. The Canner District expansion, we also just expanded that map out a little bit further. If you didn't want to pursue the broader goal, we could look at just doing a slightly expanded Cannery District. We shifted the western boundary over to 7th Street with some conversations going on and some other property owners down along Madison. We felt it might be worth dragging that district down a little further south and a little further west. There are some things setting up down the road that might make for some more opportunities for redevelopment in the future. So this adjustment of this map kind of reflects that and shows some other areas for potential redevelopment moving down the road. Again, examples of some of the properties that are ones that are potential to look for redevelopment within these spaces, ones that are underutilized, have issues. So these are types of properties that could be looked at in those types of expanded districts. Same ones as before. Again, the Southwest Industrial District, just as a reminder, this is a lot of industrial space. There's a mining and aggregate company. They do landscaping, sand and gravel in that space. Previous conversations with the owner, with other staff and the owner, have shown that they don't anticipate operating that forever. It's a large chunk of that property there is in floodplain, so it has some fundamental issues that have to be addressed to do any redevelopment in that space as well. This is I-2 heavy industrial, surrounded by moving into commercial and residential. This is no longer a good fit for the area, as we've talked in the past. This is one of those areas that we'd like to get out of the industrial space, because the comp plan shows this again as medium to high density residential moving in the commercial space. So this is the city has grown past what this traditional use is for this area. So it'd be a longer-term acquisition project.
Aaron, the green and the blue, those are two possible expansions.
Two possible expansions for the core orange area, correct. Those areas that have projects that are highly underutilized in those space. If you look up in the green area, it's a seldom used fast casual restaurant. There's a pawn shop. Those are places that may see redevelopment down the road, and that would allow the RDA to potentially work in those areas as properties become available to see them shift to different uses. And again, the blue area has some lighter industrial type of operations in there as well that, again, could work in other locations, or as they look to transition out, the RDA could capture those and, again, see them shifted into uses that are more in line with the comp plan. That would be the intent of this district. Moving to the next one, again, this examples of what is out in that industrial area today. And then just doing a little comparison, the expanded area, the Cannery expanded district, and then obviously the Southwest district doesn't have any of this type of demographics. That large expanded area, that green area that we caught, there's currently 25,389 residents living in that expanded area. They have has a growth rate of 0.37, which significantly lags the rest of the community. 10,367 households, 2.16 average size, shows the median age and the diversity index. The next one just shows some basic information on the properties.
Yes, Dave.
Pardon?
I just had a question with the last slide. What numbers go into the diversity index? I haven't seen that before.
Are you familiar with what makes that one up, Kendall?
I'm assuming the higher the number, the more diverse the area?
I believe so, yes. We can get some clarification on that and send that back out.
Okay.
This is just one of we have some reports through business analytics that we can run that just pulls a variety of demographic info. And we grabbed a selection of a few of those just to kind of highlight what's going on in those districts.
It is the higher the number, the more diverse.
The next one shows, again, a little more information about the space, median home value, percent of home ownership, vacancies. That's, again, it's identified through our report. That fluctuates, can change, but gives us an estimate of what we're looking at. Built before 1970, which is an indicator of you're starting to look at homes that may have issues with lead paint, asbestos, a number of things when working into those areas. So you are looking at a high percentage in both districts of older homes. Household incomes, they are, the median household income for the Eau Claire County is about $66,000. So they are kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of the community. We do have, as they are a qualified census tract, they also have a large percentage of our extremely low-income families are also located in those areas. Qualified census tracts by HUD definition means they have a poverty rate that is higher than the national average. So those districts in that green area, most of them are seeing poverty rates that are higher than the national trends. Qualified census tracts have some bonuses for federal programming that can operate within those QCTs. So that's why the feds track it, and it can be an important metric for some of those things. And then again, the number of businesses. Another one we went ahead and pulled is safety, pulling crime reports. An indication of blighted areas, you start to seeing certain metrics rise within those districts as a result of underlying issues with the infrastructure. So that green area accounts for 46% of the police calls in the community, 48% of crime reports, and 65% of the drug incidents occur in that green area that was identified in that first map. So again, it's an indication of underlying infrastructure issues that see those numbers rise. It's not a given, but that's a standard metric when used to measure outcomes or looking at areas that are experiencing blight and challenges. So I believe that is the rundown on those, what we're looking for, again, from some direction for the board, is there an interest in pursuing that larger focus area? And I will go and flip back to that slide. And using this larger focus area to replace pursuing, work in the cannery district. Cannery district has accompanied in this. Would this want to be one of the focus areas now, covering that broader area? We've been talking with the Housing Authority. Council has indicated that affordable housing is a key metric or a key focus through this budget process, has been one of the primary ones that's been mentioned. There's an opportunity for us working through the Housing Authority to directly impact housing in these areas. Through the RDA programming, there's an opportunity to potentially acquire and create properties that could be spun off for the Housing Authority to operate as low-income rentals for folks who are income qualified. Could be identifying properties that could be spun off to other partners that work with housing ownership for folks who are lower income. Habitat for Humanity, Home for Good, those are the types of organizations that potentially could benefit from working with an organization that can acquire and clear out blight issues and then move those properties off to somebody else who can do other things with them. So there's 3 or 4 tracks related to housing that can be executed within the screen space that the RDA would be able to direct. And if this becomes an area of focus to go to council, that would be part of our next steps, would be formulating what our redevelopment plans, strategies would be within those districts. But again, happy to take any questions, thoughts, or concerns.
To go back and answer Dave's question about the diversity index, so it measures the likelihood out of 100 residents, how many would have more than one race. So our citywide diversity index is 30.8, so we're very similar to the citywide diversity index in those 2 districts.
I think as we look at this broader district, Erin, you just talked a little bit about, when you look at some of the stats, affordability is going to be a huge piece, right? Because certainly you can see the overall income. It's a very large area. And I guess I have really 2 questions. One, I think you did a great job of talking about how does the RDA help really kind of with the strategic direction the council has around, affordable housing, partnering, those types of things. But then the other piece to this is financially, it's a very large district, right? And based on the RDA's current budget and the potential future budget, is this, I guess I'm going to ask it, is this too big of a district for us to truly effectively redevelop with the dollars we currently have and the dollars that might become available to us?
I guess the best way to look at it would be, we're not looking to redevelop everything within the district the way that RDA typically has on its other areas of focus. This simply provides a maximum opportunity to identify select properties within that district that have issues. One of the metrics that we're looking at working with is the health department, the exterior housing that survey that they do. We're looking to incorporate some of that data into these future maps as well, working with the team that does the surveying. We'll have some more of those available in the July meeting for the board to review. We'll sit down with the various organizations that work with housing and start looking at part of the process would be defining, what metric are we going to use to, what benchmarks are we going to use to identify the properties we want to track, follow, potentially pursue. Vacant properties being a prime one, so that not every property is vacant, but there's a select number of ones that these are ideal ones. AIRS is working on a map that also identifies out-of-town and out-of-state ownership. So you match out-of-town owners with vacant properties, and suddenly we have a list of, I like to move my hands when I talk. We have a list of 10 properties that these are now ones that we want to approach the property owners. They're vacant, they're out-of-state. Let's see if they're interested in selling these, getting them under RDA control and addressing the blight issue that's underlying within those spaces. So it's a big area, but you're talking about grabbing select parcels throughout that space and working with various partners and other entities like the health department, our inspections team, to put together the strategies to redevelop those. We did submit within the CIP a $1 million budget for the RDA for this budget process, for this budget cycle. Council is reviewing that. Hasn't gone forward for a vote yet, but we did put within the CIP some funding to be able to start executing plans within that.
I could try to just briefly add on to what Aaron correctly said. The new district for you to consider is an attempt to be a hybrid between the various others that were presented. So it allows the RDA to be responsive to the issue of affordable housing, but in an area that now is sort of statistically focused on that need. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist outside those boundaries, and it certainly doesn't mean that it exists. I mean, the issue of housing and affordability is universal, but in terms of likelihood of availability of infill development options to provide more of that, it attempts to focus the attention on areas that, through various metrics that Aaron showed, are consistent with the statutory definition of the area. It is an overall area. Whatever you designate, it never means that every single property within it needs or is expected to be redeveloped. Far from it. And again, the concept would be looking for opportunities, especially for infill, more affordable housing throughout that district, while also seeing that several of the areas that we see opportunity for more focused, intensive redevelopment efforts, more like the North Barstow or Cannery, also exist in this. And instead of then having to create a number of districts, you can create one that follows some fairly defined geographic boundaries, as well as those sort of different indices or metrics or of needing that type of redevelopment extra assistance.
This district encompasses a lot of other things that we've been looking at all along. The high percentage of non-conforming lots are in these spaces. These are parcels that don't meet building code because they were some of the older properties. They're extremely narrow, extremely long, and even under the new zoning code, the houses on those are likely still going to be non-conforming even under the new code because they're right on the property line and 2 feet away from the adjoining building, which is against building code of any type. So it gives opportunity to even look to clean up non-conformities and things like that. So it hits a lot of the metrics that we look at. This district encompasses the areas that have probably some of the highest occurrences of those. From the health department's housing survey, this district encompasses the areas that they've identified that have the highest number of structural deficiencies or exterior deficiencies based on their survey scoring. So it hits a lot of the metrics that we would use for measurements and gives a lot of room to work in. It's not trying to, you're not in such a small district that you've got 15 or 20 parcels to go after and that's it until you expand the district. This lets staff use the criteria that this board would set and council would set to identify a number of parcels and can track and follow parcels over a longer period of time and acquire them when the opportunity comes forward. Future discussions will still also include this board does have condemnation authority. Is this the time to start looking at using that? It's never been done with this organization, the City of Eau Claire, but it was created for purpose by statute. Is this the time to start talking about using the full authority that the RDA has as well?
And I appreciate the effort to refine and maybe help me to understand, is the Oshkosh model that we talked about earlier and you shared briefly, because that was all encompassing of the city, right? And so this one partly, so maybe the question is, did we see that as not a fit because of maybe there are problems with Oshkosh's model and so forth, and it maybe isn't an ideal model to follow, or is it just simply that this one is based more on the statistical measures that you talked about and helping to clarify and narrow our focus?
Yeah, if I could try on that, Aaron may have some other additional thoughts. So Oshkosh is doing a great job. Not here to critique Oshkosh. Talked with some of their staff, including my colleague over in Oshkosh, and but that district predates the city attorney over there as well, and Lynn's been there for about as long as I've been in Eau Claire. So however it got created, it's been there a long time, and it's a unique model in the city. There's also factual differences, between the communities, different issues of needs for redevelopment and aging housing stock that may exist in Oshkosh that perhaps don't in Eau Claire. So it is attempting to do the same good work that we're referencing here. How do you assist infill development, address aging, blighted spot properties, take opportunities in conjunction with the county on properties that may be coming into public ownership through delinquent tax rolls, and address those for the benefit of that neighborhood and for the benefit of making more available affordable housing. But what state law gives you as authority is you do have to make findings about the district. And it is an area. It was one of the things we argued about in the Voters with Facts case is, does every single property within a district need to be blighted? No. It's an area designation. And there are certain factors you have to look at and then make legislative findings on, with which you are authorized and council is authorized to make discretionary legislative decisions, but there are still factors. And, I think factors that make it advisable to focus in on areas that then have some metrics of, again, the whole list that Aaron pointed out, as opposed to going full corporate boundaries, especially for a community that is growing really fast, has a lot of really positive things going on throughout our city, but that might make it difficult to support a designation citywide.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add to that, some of the discussion with the planning staff there, and again, as City Attorney Nick had indicated, the plan's old enough that it precedes any of the staff that's there as well, but the best indication we have is the entire city was basically declared a blight district to do Oshkosh. And they're doing a shift from industrial
Maybe
to...
not what they're using on their economic development or tourism websites.
Correct. It really was to help facilitate a shift from what was a very industrial community to a more balanced community from what the planners say. And then that's their focus, is kind of changing that balance. And they've been very successful in really changing the story of Oshkosh over the years since that district was created. If we're having to look to declare the entire city a blight district, I don't think we can meet the criteria at the state statute to do that. There's just, we know there are metrics that meet in this area. That gets diluted when you take that to the full corporate boundaries, and it would be a harder case to put forward. And this core area is still the area where most of the activity would occur, because this is still the area that has some of the more challenging issues that could be addressed through the RDA's actions.
I had just a couple of comments. So just broadly, when I think about RDA and sort of the classic vision of what I think of an RDA district and project to be, I think of something that's really transformative. Think about the Cannery District here recently and locally as an example of that. But I am interested in seeing like this other approach, because I don't necessarily think that this would have the same, and we've discussed this a bit already, it wouldn't transform this entire district that we're seeing in the same way we would see it in like a very focused area. But I'm very interested, so I also serve on Housing Opportunities Commission. I know you mentioned you were having conversations with Housing Authority, the Health Department, and I think all of that synergy kind of aligning with also the momentum and community needs around housing. I'm very interested in this district and this approach and strategy, just to give RDA lend us a lot of flexibility and be very adept and just, so I guess what I'm saying is I do think my feedback is I like this approach, but I do recognize it's very different from that transformative classic RDA type of project or, effort. And yeah, I guess the only other questions I was going to ask was about in Oshkosh, what that was like, but we had good discussion on that already. So I guess my feedback is I do like this this new creative broader district approach.
That transformative project that you referenced, the Cannery District actually was a part of a progression through the RD to do that. If you look at some of the earliest projects, they were one building, one site, one building, one parcel doing one thing. And the Cannery District was the first one that had a larger district to define several properties in several areas. And North Barstow being the same thing, that North Barstow district area that encompassed multiple properties. Projects prior to that were done on a one-off. So this is kind of a natural progression from what the RDA's been doing to look at broader areas and broader things. We think there are still some project areas in there that can be single transformative projects of their own. Some of the areas that we've located in adjacent to the Cannery District, there's some larger parcels that when their time comes will be a single project that will be large. And I think the RDA is likely to play a role on those. My experience, when you look at doing improvements, select improvements within neighborhoods, you can actually transform neighborhoods by improving one or two properties. This metric has borne out in communities all over the country. Go into a neighborhood that's struggling, take one or two properties that are the worst, and if you look through, you can identify them. As we started this process, I spent an hour or so on Google Street View, rolling up and down the blocks in spaces west of the Cannery District. And in every block or two, there's one property that is exceptionally rough or exceptionally, and its impact, you can see it spill out from there to the neighboring properties and further out. So you clean up those one or two pivotal pieces in the neighborhood, and suddenly the neighborhood's investing itself again. Suddenly everybody else is like, you know what? I ought to fix my house up a little bit, maybe paint, maybe make some improvements, because this thing is no longer sitting in the middle that's dragging everybody's property values down, and there's no point fixing up. It spurs activity within those neighborhoods and those districts, which will see that improvement spread around that one property. It's a metric that that has panned out many times. So we can envision seeing some fundamental change. It's a long course of time, but we can foresee some fundamental changes in some of these areas. Folks just viewing their property differently when you take one or two of them and get them improved and in the hands of somebody who will take care of them, and somebody who has a vested interest in that space and seeing the neighborhood thrive.
I'm really encouraged by what you were just saying, and totally agree and love that approach. And I like how that can tie into this approach. I was a little concerned, and I was thinking about this as a housing-focused redevelopment district, and so I'd be interested in doing the findings and having the approach for this broader district be focused just on housing and working with neighborhoods. I think there's a lot of value to working with the neighborhoods and wanting to, I think the North Barstow expansion area, that Forest Street area, I think was of interest, but similar to what you were just saying, I wouldn't want to replace all that with a bunch of apartment buildings. So I think focusing on that neighborhood development and continuing to keep with that character, so I like that approach with the neighborhoods again. And so this could allow us to then work with the neighborhoods as they want to work with the city and the RDA to create some programs that can support that and look at those individual properties. I still like the southwest corridor, or the southwest industrial area. I think that is still a great future area to keep an eye on. And then I just want to comment on kind of building on what you were saying with kind of improving a couple of properties, and I don't want to lose sight of maybe historic preservation goals and kind of keeping with community character. There are a couple of properties on the image on South Farwell that are the gallery building and another, and I think those buildings could use some love, but I think add to the historic character and the community feel. And so again, when I think of redevelopment, I don't just think of clearing and rebuilding. So I think if we can have that approach where we're thinking about the community character and how neighborhoods are impacted, having that surgical approach. Just wanting to keep those goals in mind as well. But so, yeah, broadly, I like this if we could focus it on neighborhoods and the housing focus, still maybe have industrial select sites within it that maybe are its own district as well, if this could just be a housing focus. And just thinking too about historic preservation goals as we maintain our neighborhoods. So, thank you.
You hit some great points. Staff recommendation would be to also pursue that Southwest Industrial District at the same time. So we'd create two focus areas, this large one and still do the one in the Southwest quadrant to do traditional RDA development that we've done in the past. It fits with the comp plan, and like you make a great point. That's one that we shouldn't lose track of either. You also hit on some great points with the internal staff that we're looking to utilize to review sites. We're pulling in folks from inspections, from the health department's inspection team. We can evaluate properties that may be a target for the RDA on whether it's too far gone and it needs to be raised and rebuilt, or if there's an opportunity, you know what, this has potential to be saved, and we can connect out with some of these outside organizations that do renovations. Home for Good is an example of one that does renovations of existing housing for low-income families. Habitat is moving into renovations as well as new structures. So part of that team with inspections, so we have our building professionals in the community who understand code and can help evaluate internally whether the property is a great candidate for rehab and keeping as it is, keeping the integrity of that design in the neighborhood, or if it's just so far gone that it needs a clean slate and start over fresh.
Yeah, I appreciate this new boundary. It kind of encapsulates everything we've been looking at. I guess I would question a little explanation of crossing the river on Claremont and trying to weave through the university and capture that area as part of this boundary. It's more of a, I understand that area and we were looking at it, but if we're going to focus housing on this, I guess talk me through how we're weaving through the university and kind of those areas and why.
So a lot of that dropping south of the river and capturing that area with HSHS in that campus, in that space, there's still a lot of question marks about what's going to happen there. Is there a role that maybe the RDA needs to play down the road? If there's a lot of plans from Blue Gold owning it or having an option on it and potentially doing a long-term project or not, it just gives some opportunity or an entity that could take a look at that area if it's needed down the road. Based on what happens within that campus, there could be a number of changes that occur in that space. They may see housing, you may see other development occur in that space, and there might be an opportunity for the RDA to step in and play some level of role in that. So having in the district just allows for that. And the properties that we captured in that area was part of that South Lake district that we'd included. We know there's some folks looking. That would be, if you could slide the mouse over up onto the screen and highlight, yeah, right under that area there, or just north of there, that green area that's highlighted, yeah, that area in there are a couple of parcels. That includes like the dry cleaners, Leader Telegram building, and a few others that are potential for redevelopment.
For sure. You could capture that, though, without crossing the river and take it. I guess I mean, I don't mind that area. I just don't want it to be, I feel that it doesn't need to be included in this. We can make a boundary for that and discuss if we want to have that as an RDA, but we're sort of pulling it into something that I feel are two different real goals.
We absolutely could, if that's the direction of the board, we actually could cut that hospital section out and just leave it right at the river. That would be no problem. That'd be at your discretion.
Yeah, to your point, I think it'd be interesting to see the map of this housing district overlaid with the neighborhoods and then kind of using that as the boundaries. So that was a good catch. Thank you.
We will model that for the next meeting.
Aaron, does that, when we had the internal discussions before, if that boundary doesn't go down to Claremont, does that complicate anything with the TID that 955 is in?
The TID district is south of Claremont, so I don't know. Kitsy is still, our finance director Winters is still looking, talking with Ellers, our financial consulting firm, about the potential for TID 16 to provide borrowed funding to the RDA to do some development in that area. We don't know if the TID has to lie within the focus area district or not, and TID 16 just covers the Shotco area along Claremont and directly south of there. So we get some clarification from our financial consultants that may drive some of the district as well. That TID has a healthy anchor tenant with Station 955, the multifamily housing unit that's built in there. They receive no assistance from the city. There's no other increment going out on there right now. There are some infrastructure projects, but it's a number of roundabouts that we could push back and use increment from that project to fund other things potentially. Again, we're looking at what's allowable, what we can do under TID law and RDA statute, and we'll be able to have some more clarity as we move forward with this process. There'll be a couple of other meetings still looking at fine-tuning districts, et cetera, and fine-tuning development plans before this is something that would ultimately go to. My goal for this would be for the RDA to approve a district to take to council by the end of the year, and that way we'd have a fresh districts operational for 2026.
Just had a follow-up question for both members, Fessenmeyer and French, and obviously ultimately the whole board, but on your good comment, if that area south of the river, north of Claremont was removed, it appears we have contiguity down to the southwest concept. So, what you could potentially do is merge those two together as a more focused, commercial, industrial mixed use sort of TID that's a little more in line with what we've seen in the North Barstow and Cannery potentially, but remove it from this one. So I just throw that out there as, discuss amongst yourselves.
Not speaking for either of the two that you mentioned, but that made sense to me. It occurred to me when we talked about dropping it out that would be a logical fit for maybe to our point of transformative areas, that could fit into that in that realm as well. Just from a comment standpoint, kind of going back to when we talked about that, kind of broad concept, and I think it is relevant to reflect that one of our hesitations about taking the citywide approach was that very difference that you mentioned, Jessica, from an RDA standpoint of kind of taking that focus into the housing side of the picture. But given council's focus in that regard, the obvious need that's present and so forth, I think this is a good fit and a good concept to at least to explore that direction further.
I agree. I think the one thing that I hate to be the person who continues to talk about the budget, but I'm going to talk about the budget again. I think, going back to this is we're going to need to have the $1 million that is part of the request to City Council. So we need to align whatever the next district is with the vision that the council has. And so, doesn't matter where the boundaries are we aligning it with the vision? Will we have the funds to do it? Because you can have a lovely large district, small district, but truthfully, if it takes you 26 years, as some of the districts have, okay, Steve might say 30, to have the funds and have the interest, I think that's the other part. So I like it. I like the diversity of a broader area, but I do think, to the points that were made, we're going to have to align this, from what I'm hearing, to affordable housing in order to make sure that we're truly, meeting the needs of the city, meeting the needs of the council, and effectively having the dollars to go and, even if it's surgically remove, some of these buildings. I think the other piece I would be interested in as we talk about this district, again, in the last 2 or 3 meetings, Aaron, you have quietly talked about condemnation without talking about the fact that we've never done it. I think at some point we need to thoroughly understand, what does that look like? What would that mean? The RDA hasn't done it. And is there truly an interest to ever do that, right? Because otherwise it just becomes kind of this underlying topic of, you know, what would be the tolerance if in fact we were put into that position? I guess I'd like to better understand that as well. But other than that, I support the new boundary district.
We can definitely put that on a future agenda item.
Just to add on to the district talk for the southern side of the river, I think it works, and thinking about the goals of that district being creating that destination place similar to Cannery District, and so building in how does all of that tie together certainly would be a great conversation and an exercise to look at how we maximize the river all the way through from the university down through that industrial area.
Wayne, if I could, a couple quick comments on good comments by Member Haller that first of all, on eminent domain, it's not that we haven't utilized that authority. I mean, we acquired, and every time any public entity that has eminent domain authority, you are utilizing it. You're letting somebody know that we are working towards acquisition of your property. So the authority's been invoked. It was frequently, especially in the North Barstow. We never had to go to an involuntary sale. Every time we reached a voluntary arm's length transaction, or a voluntary transaction, but it wasn't necessarily, the property wasn't for sale first. We were saying we are going to buy it. So in that way, it's actually not arm's length. It is compulsory, but the sale price was voluntarily agreed upon. So the RDA knows how to exercise and has exercised that authority. But on properties that were generally commercial, often vacant, definitely distressed, different setting, as we've talked about a little bit with some of the other expansions in residential, different legally and also different policy-wise. But there are so many opportunities to make difference on infill without use of eminent domain. The city itself owns a number of vacant parcels that are suitable for infill residential redevelopment. The city and the RDA have a long history, which you continued earlier this morning, of trading properties in a cooperative manner, even though, again, you're different entities. City could choose to do that. Again, city council decision ultimately through a process of excess land, but we could go through that, and if a district like this was formed, those sort of properties suitable for infill development could be moved from city ownership into RDA ownership to then facilitate this sale to various entities, whether it's Habitat or Home for Good or Pablo Group or any number of entities that might want to build more affordable housing. Just a pitch, to see if Jenny was going to bite on that. And you're not the same as what would still be great to have stood up in the community of sort of a private land trust sort of concept, but you could function in a lot of those ways. You could also function as a facilitating entity between the county on properties that have already fallen often vacant or unused and now into tax deficiency, delinquency, and are available for sale. But the county typically doesn't mean they couldn't perform this function, and we'd welcome the county doing that too and assisting, but you could be that intermediary entity of acquiring at a foreclosure or tax delinquency sale and then moving it into housing. You also have bonding and borrowing authority. So if you have a book of properties, and typically you haven't held them real long, but if you start having properties that do have a development value, even if in the end you might give them away, but they are marketable properties, perhaps you can work with a group of local banks or credit unions that would be willing to give favorable terms and start doing your own financing based on actually having a bigger area and some equity there in terms of home ownership or property ownership. So a variety of options that would allow the RDA to function more broadly and more effectively to move parcels that are either just not being used at all or not being used in a positive way back into productive ownership and make available infill housing at least more affordable rates. So a few thoughts on some of the financing from, please note, somebody who isn't paid to do financing. So.
So, Aaron, are you looking just for this feedback as a general acceptance of exploring that? Do you need a motion from us? What are you looking for from us?
I think at this point in time, I'd look for just a consensus from the board to continue to develop this focus area, start doing some of the refinements that were referenced here today, and continue to advance this towards what might be a formal adoption of a development district for the RDA. If it looks, I see a lot of head shaking. It looks like that's an affirmative from the board to continue to advance this project forward. And would you want to continue us to advance the Southwest Industrial Quadrant District as well to create that as a traditional RDA development? I'm seeing a lot of affirmatives there. So we will continue to advance those two districts forward then. Thank you. Very good discussion today.
All right, and I assume you're going to carry the EPA Brownfields Assessment Grant update as well?
Yes, I will do that. We are still meeting regularly with our EPA Brownfield folks. We are working on a couple of phase one environmentals and doing a couple of projects that we think will advance some level of basic planning that's allowable through the grant. We are working with a couple of other property owners to get approvals to go in and do the phase one on there. One of the ones we're looking at is the old Walters Brewery building on the north side of Madison. We've been talking with the owner. They're interested, looking to schedule up a meeting, just kind of sit down and walk through that, and then we'll have Ayers be able to go in and do the investigation on that. We are going through the process with the Malden Avenue site off Bird Street. That was a vacant lot that was left over when we acquired space to build Fire Station 10. There's an interested party looking to develop there. We knew there were some underlying issues as an undeclared landfill. So we're working through getting the proper documentation and everything forward through the grant to potentially see that redeveloped for the city. And then we have a couple of other projects that we're locking. We're still looking for interested landowners, property owners that have sites that they own and are maybe been thinking about redeveloping but are not sure. There's still a lot of funding available to do phase one and phase twos. And as I said, there's some initial planning that can be done as part of that process too. It's all paid for by the grant. So if you're aware of any property owners or anybody who has space that you might have questions on for redevelopment, we're looking at existing structures as well as just vacant land, because they can go in and do asbestos analysis, lead paint analysis to determine what remediation costs might be to get a project set up for redevelopment. So there's a pretty broad use of the funding. I'd be happy to answer any questions as it relates to that grant program.
I feel like we've asked, if I can't remember, is that dry cleaner part of this program? We talked about that.
We are trying to, I reached out to the owner. He's shown some interest in having us do the phase one. The Ayers has done a little bit of the preliminary work that they can do, but they still have to get, there's always an on-site component, and we have to get approval to get on-site. We haven't connected on that yet, but we are talking with them as a potential project as well, yes. That was one of the early ones we identified. That's all I have for the brownfields then.
Okay. Anything more to add from an executive director's report?
Broader, the P&R Properties District and the Cannery, they have their occupancy on the first building and are moving forward rapidly on the second building. That one will have the 10,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor. For our couple of our new board members, they ended up not doing 10,000 square feet of commercial on the ground floor of the first building because their bank wouldn't finance for commercial space. So they shifted their process or program to do strictly residential, but they are keeping the 10,000. They have a ton of interest in that space and will likely see that leased up fairly quickly. The Riverside site directly across the street from there, have spoken with Moding. They are taking a look at, can they make the live workspaces they originally pitched work on that site? So they're kind of sharpening their pencils, relooking at the numbers on that development. We also connected with a secondary project that was interested in the space. That's more of a, definitely fits the maker's mold. It's more of a commercial space to facilitate their business that's growing. Won't go in a lot of detail because wait for them to get some information submitted, but the product they make now has just landed in Whole Foods in about a dozen or so locations. So what they're doing is definitely growing, they're catching on, and they need more space. We connected them with the local builder who can potentially actually take these folks who know nothing about building and get them into a facility that might be coming forward as a potential project for the Riverside site. We are going to be blasting out the Kessler Park location for redevelopment space here shortly. We've had a few inquiries about that. We'll give you a heads up. There's one person, an individual who's been interested in that space. It is a very philanthropic project. We did set some benchmarks that they have to reach for funding before we bring a formal presentation to the board. They did request if they could come and talk about their concept to the board in the July meeting. And if there's no real concerns with that, we would invite them to touch base on it. It would be no obligation from the board of any type. It just gives them a chance to kind of describe what they're looking to do. They have some initial engineering and some initial design work done. Right now, they're just trying to raise capital to do what they're looking to do on that project. We have seen some other minor interest projects in the Kessler. When we do the blast out, though, we should start getting a lot more response. Haven't seen anything new on the Riverside site. It's still have some interest from a couple of developers who we've worked with before looked at it. They've got other projects they're trying to finish up first, and then they're potentially going to be turning their focus on doing something within that space. We've talked to a few of them about kind of reimagining what the master plan showed, which the master plan just showed 3 large buildings, about 140 units. Myself and Ryan Petrie, one of our planners, we walked the site extensively one afternoon, and we came up with the idea that it might be easier to develop 1 or 2 mid-sized density multifamilies on the southern end where the space kind of has a bowl at the bottom, and then it narrows as it goes up the hill towards the High Bridge Trail along the Chippewa River Trail. It might be better to do like offset staggered townhomes running up the hill as a better way to develop there than trying to break in and do another larger multifamily space. Couple of developers, we mentioned that concept to have piqued their interest, and that may provide some ownership opportunity in the cannery district, which we still get a lot of inquiries, folks who are interested in the cannery, like, okay, what can we buy? We want to own something in there. So that could be some ownership opportunities in that space. So we'll keep on top of the folks who have expressed some interest. Interest rates in construction, it still keeps folks a little tempered. I still hear a lot of projects telling us 5.5% is what makes their numbers work, and we're not there yet. So it's keeping a temper on a few of the projects that we had seen looking at the space, but still a lot of interest in the community, and we expect to keep seeing interest coming in these spaces moving forward. Any questions in general about what's going on through the?
Just a quick question for clarification. That last area you were talking about with the staggered, that's the area north of the park in Kenner?
Correct.
Okay, cool.
Yep. The broader area, the city's used it to store like aggregate and snow in the past. It's already turned over. It is the RDA's property now, and there's enough space there to do 1 or 2 larger developments and then shift focus as it moves up the hill with the slopes.
Yeah, it was the one where you previously had seen a supportive senior living
55 and up leisure
type
facility.
Yep. That
Yep.
hurts now for some reason. But
Yes,
anyway,
Steve.
it was one that the RDA had been working with a developer for a while, but just know that there was a major critique concern that it was like much too much building there. It was a big monolith, continuing building. So, breaking that space up. I mean, you've got residential very nearby. So, the townhome concept, myself. I think it's
Yeah.
got a lot of potential.
That sounds really good for them. That's
Yeah,
fun.
and we still talk to that development group periodically. They haven't given up their interest on it. Their project was just sensitive to interest rates. And they're one of the first ones that told us 5.5% is what they needed to make that project pencil out. So if we see a dip in interest rates enough, we may see them come back to the table with that project or a modification of that project. Well, I'll be there in a year, Steve, so I'm with you on that.
All right, thank you for the presentation. As noted, our next meeting date is July 16th, and unless there's anything else, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I do have one thing I wanted to make. I'll make it very quick. So as discussed, just as a reminder or announcement, I guess, to RDA, the City Council will be considering our capital improvement plan budget at our meetings next week, I believe, unless there's been any delays. I know staff had mentioned the potential for delays depending on amendments, but
I don't think so at this point in time.
so just as Aaron mentioned, there is currently slated $1 million in the budget for RDA, and so just if any RDA members want to, especially as it relates to the discussion we had this morning, want to advocate for that, just reminder on timing. There's a public hearing Monday night, 6 p.m., and then council, unless there's any delays, would be taking that up in our legislative session on Tuesday afternoon at 4 next week. So that's it.
Thank you. Timely and helpful. So with that, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir. Yes, we do. So perfect. Thank you.